The idea is that everything that we're going to see in this future compresses in time. You're seeing it with software development. Your learning curve gets compressed in time, but it's the matrix, as you said. Download that skill. So all of these compressions in time mean there's greater urgency than ever before.
How's it, Exponential Africa? Throughout history, every major technology has changed the way we live. The wheel changed transportation, electricity changed industry, the internet changed communication, but AI feels different. Because for the first time, we're not simply automating physical work. We're beginning to automate intelligence itself. And when intelligence becomes abundant, something profound happens. The rules that govern work, education, creativity, our relationships, our economies, and even our understanding of ourselves begins to shift, which raises some important questions. If AI becomes the operating system of the economy, what remains the operating system of humanity? And to join me to explore this, I'm joined by Professor Adam Pantanowitz, researcher, entrepreneur, innovator, Singularity expert, and founder of multiple successful companies. He's one of South Africa's leading thinkers at the intersection of AI, computing, complexity, and human systems. Ad, so great to be here back at Exponential Africa.
Thank you, Mick, for having me and for the very warm welcome and intro. And I agree with you, everything you've said about AI being so transformative to the economy. It does raise this fundamentally human question about our future. And I think there's a lot of people really engaging with this narrative at the moment.
It's just fascinating. I mean, I've got my mom-in-law and people you meet on the side of the street, and everyone's just diving in and building using this technology.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, and I know for many years we've been talking about the democratization of technology, and you see it unfolding before our very eyes. You see people leveling up themselves with unbelievable access to the world's most intelligent beings that are coming online all the time. It's just a phenomenal time to see that unfold.
And I think that leads us to our first question: is why, in your mind, do you think this is fundamentally different from previous technological revolutions?
I think that what we've been seeing is human level parity at things that humans can do and could uniquely do for a long time. In other words, for the last while, 20 years or so, we've been automating aspects of humanity that have been brought online with human level parity, i.e., machines can do things that humans could uniquely do as well as humans can do them. And that's been happening over the last 20 or so years, perhaps a bit longer, depending on which type of skill you think about. But what we're starting to find is that without human intervention, computers are starting to become able to do things that humans can do in an emergent way. Now, these are things that humans could uniquely do, things like planning and language. These are fundamental human traits. So this is entirely different from what we've seen before, or what we've studied about the past, because previously we were replicating some aspect of humanity and then finding a way to scale it. In this case, we're doing it in an entirely new way where it's almost an emergent property of a system. And it's the very thing that allowed us to do that before that's being replicated. That is the subtle point. That is fundamentally why it's different. The subtle point is before we used the thing to create the tools, now we have created the thing that creates the tools. That is a total paradigm shift. And that's where we are now.
It's just incredible. I mean, I don't know if you saw Claude Anthropic. Some of their researchers came out of the paper. I think it was just this week where they spoke about most of the code written at Anthropic now is actually written by the AI. And,
Yes.
It's pretty phenomenal what's going on there. I think 80% of the code is written by AI currently, and soon to be, 100%.
I mean, isn't that entirely phenomenal? I can't say that it was a surprising result in that, again, you and I have had conversations before where we had the sense that in the future, machines would be able to create other versions of themselves. So this has been commonplace in, for instance, Tesla factories, where Tesla factories are creating the robots that go out and do the sensing, collect data, and then send it back to the factory to iterate for the next generation, right? It's a self-improving loop or system. It was unsurprising when we came to realize that a lot of this is happening in one of the biggest AI labs in the world, or arguably the biggest AI company in the world as of recent data. So it is unsurprising because we knew that this loop would start. This loop has been happening in very small ways for a very long time. And I think it's what is surprising is the amount, the 80% metric, and the fact that it is influencing so many people now in terms of the reach of this product. So those two are surprising elements of this fact. But the fact that they are self-improving loops is almost unsurprising. We knew that there would be this moment of takeoff. We've been living through it for a number of years as well. We've been sort of on this continuum, and that number is going to tip further and further toward 100%. It's almost inevitable. But what we'll see is not just an improvement on the tooling. For instance, Claude Code's being written by Claude models, but also the next generation of machine learning tooling and machine learning itself will be generated, explored, discovered through similar loops where machines generate other machines. It's inevitable, and it is part of the exponential takeoff through which we're living.
We really are living through this exponential takeoff. I totally agree. It feels like we're on this incredible wave of change that's coming, and I think there's a lot of people misunderstanding how big this is. What do you think most people misunderstand about this current AI moment? In America especially, you're seeing a lot of this anti-AI rhetoric going around, especially in campuses and colleges and the youth. On TikTok, even in South Africa, I spoke to a young girl. She was 16. She was, no, AI is going to take all our jobs. We don't want this. We don't, less AI, less AI. So what are people misunderstanding, and how do we get into it?
I think this is fundamentally playing on that idea of fear and excitement. And there's a tension between those two emotions that cause the amplification of information. So everyone's talking about this because it's so volatile. On the one hand, we're experiencing a sense of fear. What does this mean for our future? There's instability. The future becomes uncertain. On the other hand, there's excitement. This is incredible technology. It brings about so much promise, potential, power. And those are conflicting and create volatility. And so there's a lot of discussion. But what people are fundamentally, I think, misunderstanding is that these technologies are not technologies necessarily that can be or need to be creative, as in they don't necessarily need to create the world around around us. What they can instead do is empower us to create the world in new ways. And that means that there's a huge barrier that gets dissolved. I want to give you a very practical example of this. I'm seeing this all over the show at the moment. So previously, I was part of engineering at Wits. I was part of engineering education. Going through engineering education, I personally studied at undergrad level for 5 years. I did postgraduate level work and research for 15 years. So I spent a long time learning the discipline of, for instance, software, which allowed me to solve problems. The fundamental objective of learning software was so that we could solve problems. Took me 20 years. It takes young engineers at least 4 years to get through the program, and then they have to get work experience, and then they go into the workforce, but they're able to bring their problem-solving mindset to bear to solve a given problem. That fundamental problem-solving mindset is what allows them to then bring about a solution that changes society. It brings about some solution into society. And that's what we seek. That's what we want to see happen. That's the objective we want. Now, everything is changing. I've got people who studied marketing or didn't study at all. I've got youngsters who are approaching me who have solved problems using the tools that they have been given through this democratization of access to technology. It's a profoundly different shift. Imagine that. You don't have to anymore go through the barriers and gatekeeping that are set up by society in order to get you to a point at which you can solve a problem. You can do it immediately. Technology is a powerful force for just breaking down all barriers. Not just breaking down barriers, but breaking down the gatekeepers who hold the keys to those barriers. Technology is changing all of that. Now, if you think about the opportunity that creates, that turns you into an overnight DJ. That turns you into an overnight software development
The
professional. In
matrix.
other words, pardon, it's magic.
It's the matrix. You get plugged
It's the
in.
Matrix. It's totally the Matrix. It's totally the Matrix. You just npm install a new skill. It is genuinely the Matrix. And what this means is that the barriers that we perceived before, the amount of time it would take to have an impact on society, are just dissolving. That means you can go out and become whatever you want to be using these tools. So I don't see this as a shutdown of our humanity. I don't see this as a suppression of our humanity. I see this as a complete catalyst. It is the fire that's going to ignite everyone who wants to be ignited. If you're a high agency person, you want to solve a problem, this is your time, because any problem that you have in your life is now soluble. You can pick up these tools and you can just go and solve the problem. And that's unbelievably powerful. There's never been a time like this.
It's just phenomenal. I think I totally agree. I think that it actually happened to me this morning is that Shane, my brother, is using these tools and he's building out some incredible things, which before would not be in his wheelhouse. But now
Right.
through this technology, he's also been democratized and empowered. And I think you speak to people every day and they've got something new that they've built, and it's no longer just an idea. It's show me what you've built and what can it do.
Totally. And while that's scary we're talking about software. If you don't mind, let's talk quickly about software developers. That is a scary thing for software developers. I went through it. A lot of people go through this sort of existential moment where they're like, realize how profound this is, that it's so accessible. But then when you play with these tools, you realize that you can scale that skill and that you still have all of your expertise, and those expertise become amplified. So you've got to look at it as coding is right now a solved problem, but software development is not a solved problem. So you still need that software development mindset, that systems thinking, that problem solving mindset in order to engage with these tools. All of those curiosity moments that you cultivated in your education and university, they still exist, they still needed. So it's just the world is fundamentally changing, but the solutions we need to bring about haven't disappeared. In fact, there are more problems than ever. And there's a great saying that I think it goes, there's no greater source of problems than solutions. In other words, the solutions that we put in place create more problems that need to be solved. There's no shortage of problems. I mean, we're going to create new problems. New problems will emerge. And so we're going to have to figure out how to solve those.
That's brilliant. I think that's really brilliant. And also, like, if you think about it, there's multiple levels and there's depth of knowledge that we have. You can and by studying a craft or becoming an expert in a field, you get that deep knowledge in that space. And now with AI, you can actually use that knowledge to create new knowledge. You can create this next level, this extended thinking. So I think that these tools enable anyone to do anything, but as you get deeper into the actual craft or whatever you're trying to achieve, there are those layers still. There are still those layers, and the deeper you go with that knowledge, the more successful you're going to be in whatever you're trying to build or create.
There's absolutely no doubt about that, and that's very wise. And I think in what you're saying, there's a lot of wisdom, because I think the Dunning-Kruger effect still exists. That even with these tools now, we see ourselves as suddenly we're unbelievable experts, and then we go through this crash where we realize, oh wow, we know very little, and then we have to spend time to recover from that to actually become a true expert. That still exists. So we must be mindful of that, and also that these tools are not without their complexities. As an example, Mick, a lot of people are working alone in echo chambers or in these silent interactions with AI where their minds are getting updated and changed. And then what they do is they're going out into the world and they're assuming that other people are having that same kind of mindset, where the other people haven't yet been through that conversation, that shift, that thought process. And they're wondering, oh, how does this person not know immediately what I'm talking about? And this is causing some interesting social emergent challenges, I believe, especially with negotiations and business. People are starting to leverage and use these tools in those contexts, and they're finding themselves in fundamentally different places. So you need to become aware of how to use these tools effectively. And one of the ways is to actually ask the tool in your system prompts to be adversarial and to challenge your thinking instead of automatically reinforcing it. And that helps. That is one way of using these tools. And that can help you with a discussion, with a conversation, to I suppose, get the most out of these tools without potentially amplifying your own biases, where you're forgetting that there's a whole other person on the other side, and you're perhaps interacting with your large language model and convincing yourself of being righteous or correct and using it in a sycophantic way. So, of course, that is another huge problem that's arisen as a result of these tools that's going to need to be solved in society. It just creates opportunity. It's an
Yeah, I think
opportunity machine.
that's a really good insight. Is that people are at different points of their journey in all of this. So like exactly that, when the penny drops and you have that eureka moment, maybe somebody else hasn't had that moment yet and they can't see that eureka moment. And then when you try to tell it to them, they're like, "Whoa, I don't get you. You seem a bit wacky." So I think that's a great insight into that. And I mean, I know you like to develop. You started off in the dev space. Like, how much are you developing at the moment? With all of this new tooling power.
I
Have
mean,
you?
argue, arguably, I'd stopped developing apart from scripts here and there because my time didn't allow for it, and it was such a long process that I was working at a different level of abstraction, perhaps in the solution space rather than in the individual coding space. So, what I mean concretely by that is that I had gotten to a point in my career where I wasn't really working in code. And the onset of these tools totally brought me back in. And this isn't, I'm not the only person to whom this happened. There was another engineer who was telling us the other day that he is passionate about solving a given problem. Suddenly he's coding again because he has the ability to understand the system. Of course, he's not necessarily hands on writing code, he's just immersed in this world that we're discussing. And so it was similar with me. I went pretty much full time back into building stuff. And now I'm building almost almost full time. I mean, I'm just building new things and just playing and exploring and having an immense amount of fun discovering how these tools work. And there are all these emerging beautiful moments that are occurring where I realize, oh, I need the following thing, and I just can do it. And not instantaneously, but relative to the past, nearly instantaneously. And then you get a new element to your solution, a new property, a new discovery, a new exploration. So it's an endless rabbit hole. It's just so much fun. I feel like Alice in Wonderland.
Unbelievable. Yeah, we can't wait to see some of these new products birthed into physical and digital space. What advice can you give people that are trying to upskill themselves, or maybe they're in university, or they're an entrepreneur, or they're in an organization? What should they be focusing on then in the next decade? What do you actually focus on to upskill yourself?
It's great. I don't know if any of us really and truly know. So I think the best as a gambling or betting person, best advice is to give general advice. And the general advice I would give is to be curious, to try to solve problems, to cultivate your skill of solving problems, but to be specific. And I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say you need to understand how things connect at a systems level. So try to draw pictures of systems, cultivate that skill of actually breaking something down into its constituent components. And you can think of anything and try to draw pictures of how those things connect. Systems exist at all levels of abstraction. There's this beautiful quote that all the world's a system and everything's a signal. So the world at different levels of complexity has systems everywhere you look. And when you bring about a solution, you can think of it as a system. When you break something down as a system, it helps you simplify the problem. It helps you distill out the complexity, the boundaries of that system. You understand its properties. Then you can start to break it down into its components and design that as a solution. That helps you to intervene at the correct level when you're solving a problem. So cultivate that systems level thinking, because that to me is going to govern how we bring about solutions into the next 10 years. That systems thinkers are going to create the future using these tools. So if you're not a systems thinker at the moment, study it. Start to think about systems, start to think about things at a systems level. Think about data as a signal. Where can you get data? And use that curiosity to drive you forward in terms of systems thinking. So specifically, go and do that. That's going to help massively when it comes to using these tools. You'll understand the tools better. You'll understand the world better. You'll understand the interface between the two much more effectively.
I think that's great advice. You almost have to zoom out. You have that zoomed out approach. Zoom out and then zoom in.
Absolutely.
And how do you think it's going to reshape education? Because education is definitely going to change, and it is changing.
Definitely.
Fast.
Definitely, without question. This is something I've been grappling with a bit for various reasons. I mean, of course, I think a fair bit about education, having been involved with the university, but I'm starting to see practically how society is changing and that there will be a complete knock-on effect into the structures of employment. And it begs the question of then what do we do upstream in order to change the system of education in order to cater for the realities of the current world? So I think education, first of all, will shift to be much more outcomes focused. Those outcomes will be about achieving some goal or objective in an open loop, open-ended way, which will mean that students will immerse themselves in much more in the problem solving and applied side of things. And they're going to have all the tools to just immerse themselves and do it. Of course, we still need to cultivate those first principle thinking people who are able to understand the world and are able to model it. And I don't think that education is going to shift us fundamentally away from basic education as people might imagine. But the way of delivering that education is going to fundamentally shift. It will mean that we will have much more personalization in the education process, much more hands-on or one-on-one. And I think teachers are going to start shifting to become facilitators of that process, that self-enablement process, that cultivation of agency process. And to me, that is what the world really needs. We need thousands of people who are able to solve problems. We need hundreds of thousands of people who are able to take the initiative to do good in the world by wielding the power of technology. And I think that the education system will respond to that.
Totally agree. I mean, I don't know if you've looked at some of the schools that are coming up, like Alpha School or Apex
Yeah.
School, where the kids learn for 2 hours in the morning and using AI, and they're learning at a much more accelerated rate. And then the afternoon is about group learning and social skills and critical thinking and problem solving, as humans.
Right.
And these students are motivated and they're doing incredible things. I don't know if you've been seeing it. It's unbelievable what they're achieving.
It's truly unbelievable. And I have seen it and I'm fascinated by it. I don't know if it's the answer, if it's the panacea yet, but I think I'm so glad that people are iterating and playing in this space. And those outcomes are not surprising as well, because when you are studying in a rigid school environment of the past, everyone's going at what, sort of a group velocity. You imagine there's an electrical engineering principle, the group velocity. Everyone's kind of has to move forward as a group. And some people inevitably get left behind, and for whatever social reasons, they might not ever catch up because they're scared to ask. And there's no way to detect that. So working as a cohort in a non-individualized way has been a disaster for our species for a very long time. A disaster. Of course, it worked for a world of 200 years ago. It worked remarkably effectively. But as human knowledge has developed and the world has changed, that old structure has not worked for a long time. And I think that as we individually, uniquely drift through that, you get some students who are ahead who get completely bored and detached because they're going through things at a group velocity. Now, if you imagine that I know, let's say, 6 out of 10 things, I still have to learn those 6 things at the group velocity and then only get onto the 4. But what happens if we could figure out which 4 I don't know immediately and just solve those 4? For me, then I know it's 10 out of 10. And the same for you, Mick, 8 out of 10 things. Figure out which 2 you don't very quickly. Focus on that. Spend all your available time on those 2. I'll spend all my available time on my 4. And then we'll both get to the same place. But we get there much faster. And we're still doing it together. It's just that it's focused on Mick and it's focused on Adam. And my deficiencies and your deficiencies are caught up. And suddenly we all get there with an unbelievable acceleration. That is the moment we're in now. That's the power of the future of education in a personalized way. We go through it together because that camaraderie is important and there are social development aspects that are important. So it mustn't be, just isolated in homeschool or an isolation chamber. It must be together, but it is personalized and you are getting a different experience from my experience. That is the powerful upgrade and unlock to education, I think.
Love it, love it, love it. With this whole concept of reprogramming humanity and this new operating system around society, Many people are talking about AGR. We're living in the singularity now. I think on moonshots they talk about it every day. How we're living through the singularity. What do you think of these concepts?
I mean, the concept of the singularity, it's a continuum as well. We've been thinking about it, talking about it for a number of years since Ray Kurzweil, I believe, coined the phrase. I think it's this phrase. There's,
Logical singularity. Yeah.
yeah, I think that we are seeing it come to life now in a very material way. It's manifesting into reality right now. We're seeing it happening around us. And so I think it's profoundly relevant. I think that the acceleration is not going to stop. I think we are seeing this liftoff. I hope we're ready with our humanity. You know, I often think about technology as this extension of our neurological system because, like we said earlier today, we designed these systems from our neurological system. They are, as systems, a representation or a reflection of us. That means that the fundamental science, sure, we didn't invent the physics, but we studied the physics. And then we leveraged the physics to engineer a solution like a computer. All of that was brought about by us and in a way is a reflection of us. The properties of language, which we've now encapsulated into a large language model, that is a system that reflects us. All of these tools are extensions of our neurological systems into reality. It's a concept I really think a lot about. And as mirrors of us and as amplification tools of us, it means that it has all aspects of us, the desirable aspects, the undesirable aspects, all of the complexity that is the human species. And I suppose my hope is that we're ready to level up our humanity because we understand the consequences of not doing so very quickly. I think that we're at a precipice of knowing what that's going to feel like very, very soon. If we don't activate our humanity now very urgently and very seriously, my concern is that we're never going to have the opportunity to do so again. I just think that that's profound.
It's totally profound, and I think the timelines are pretty urgent. It's actually happening right before our eyes in the next couple of years. It's here.
Correct. It's compressed. There's time compression now. Those machines, those Teslas sending out from the factory, getting data, building the next generation. That creates a time compression. Robots are not born young, they're born old.
That's
So
interesting.
the idea is that everything that we're going to see in this future compresses in time. You're seeing it with software development. Your learning curve gets compressed in time to code because you just get front loaded. It's the matrix, as you said. Download that skill. So all of these compressions in time mean there's greater urgency than ever before. It's greater urgency than ever before.
So what do you think we're going to look like in 20 years? What's exciting you most about 20 years from now?
As a species or as individuals,
Both.
I think what's most exciting for me 20 years from now is that I believe that technology has the potential or power to massively change how our species deals with and exists on this planet. And what I mean by that is that our experience of life can fundamentally shift. Now, technology has been profoundly impactful in totally disrupting the types of difficulties that humans go through in terms of things like access to resources. Now, we haven't solved all resource access problems by any stretch of the imagination in the current world, but technology has the promise to show that physical suffering and complexity around physical suffering can be totally alleviated. That's the first class of suffering that humans endure. The second class of suffering that humans endure are non material in nature, and they're more to do with the experience of mind and the way that we're living. And I think technology has been profoundly bad so far at showing us how to alleviate that level of suffering. But I don't think that that's the result of technology. I think that's the result of human structures being amplified. And I imagine a world in the next 20 years where technology can be used and wielded to prevent human suffering in both types of suffering, in both classes at scale, and that it can ultimately ease all of human suffering. That to me is the most profound idea that I've come across and that I believe and that I live by. And when I try to make a decision on what I would spend my energy on, it's often motivated by that fundamental thought that we're now at a point in time where we can use technology to alleviate the future suffering of humans. I feel like that's a fundamentally important idea, a property of life that we should be all embracing. And if we can make our decisions from that vantage point, the world will be remarkably better for all of us, not just for the person who's creative and is generating the solution, because they will get a great deal out of it. You alleviate suffering at scale, you will get a lot out of that process, whatever your objectives are, whether it's self-gratification or self-actuation, or whether it's monetary. If you want to earn a lot of money, you solve problems for people, you ease their suffering. I mean, unbelievable, compelling proposition. But on the other side, all the people whose suffering is alleviated, what a profound moment for our species. So that is what I'm most excited about. The idea that we can have a better life, live better lives, live easier lives, live lives with less suffering. We might be the first species generation now to ease suffering.
It's a really fantastic thought and a great way to close out. Let's have an abundant future for all, abundantism. But you know what I actually want to do is I want to do a quick fire round. I want to ask you a couple of quick fires where you can just give me a very short or one-word answer, up to you.
Okay.
So tell me one thing people are underestimating about AI.
Potential.
One thing that they're overestimating.
Downside.
Do we reach AGI before 2035 as per Ray's timeline of 2029?
I didn't even need to hear the timeline. I mean, yes, my belief is we do. My belief is we do, and not necessarily in the current paradigm of machine learning, but because of the invention of the next generation through these tools. We've solved coding, right? There's time compression. It's deceptive how quickly things are going to move, and we're going to bring online new models, world models, new ways of representing the world, ways of thinking. Short answer, yes.
What one skill every child should learn?
I want to say problem solving, but I'm going to say something slightly different, even though I said problem solving in a very clever way. And that's resilience, Mick. I think kids should learn to be and build their resilience. The world isn't easy through this transition. There's going to be hard knocks. You have to know that that is not your identity. Your identity is safe. You're intrinsically great. Fundamentally, what the world does around you is not a reflection of what you are and who you are. Build your resilience.
Love it. And one technology beyond AI that excites you?
I mean, I'm always in love and enamored with biotech, as you know. So biotech, what I would say is that these exponential technologies bootstrap each other. When one is working, it works to serve all of the others. So AI will impact biotech. Biotech will impact AI. What I'm excited about right now is the onset of what AI has done in terms of the protein folding problem. DeepMind have come up with this unbelievable solution to the protein folding problem, which when I was studying at university, our professor believed that it would never be solved. That was an intractable problem of science. And here we are, stone's throw later in time. It's solved to a large extent. It can be modeled. And that's going to give rise to unbelievable advances in curing ailments, disease, easing suffering. It's powerful.
Really powerful. So what's clear that from this conversation is that AI isn't simply becoming another technology wave. It's a shift of nature, or it's a nature shift of intelligence itself. And as intelligence becomes increasingly abundant, the challenge won't simply be building smarter machines. It's going to be understanding ourselves, our values, our purpose, and what it means to be human in a world where intelligence is no longer scarce. Perhaps the future isn't about artificial intelligence replacing humanity. Perhaps it's about artificial intelligence helping humanity become more fully human. Adam, thanks so much for joining us and for sharing your insights. To everyone watching, the future isn't being written by technology alone. It's being written by the choice we make about how we use it. So let's keep building. Make sure to follow Adam on all his social channels, and we'll see you on the next Exponential Africa. Make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks so much, Adam.
Thank you, Mick. Great to chat to you.